Hi, Peter Charles here, Folk to Fly Fishing. And when we're starting out in learning to tie our own flies, at some point in time, we'll be in a situation where we have to modify our pattern. Most of the common reasons are that we just don't have the materials that are required for the pattern, so we substitute something. For example, when I first started fly tying, my first flies were partridge and orange, but I didn't have any partridge. So I used grizzly hen because the only thing I had that was close. It still worked, still caught fish on them. So you can modify certain patterns. Sometimes they don't work as well, though. The original material was in there for a reason. And if you talk to the originator of the pattern, they'll tell you why it's in there, or you might read why it's in there. So sometimes, changing a critical piece of material can have adverse effects on either its fish catching ability or the way it swims or whatever. But it may not work the way you want it to work because you've substituted material. A lot of the time, though, it doesn't make any difference, and sometimes it even works out better. Another reason might be where you've put a pattern together and you think, well, I'd like to change it. Be creative, do something different. That's where we can really get into problems with things not, swimming well. So, for example, the steelhead flies, they have to swim properly when swung. You might modify a pattern, a steelhead pattern, and it doesn't swim properly anymore. So there's some things to consider. But I think the most compelling reason to modify patterns is to make it fit your local insect and fish populations better, the prey species. For example, let's take a look at my fly box here. These flies here are Kings River caddis that's not following the original pattern all that closely. A couple will have the cream bodies of the original pattern, but most of them have green bodies, which I've changed because I see more green-bodied caddis than any others. Some of them have gray, some have darker wings, some of them are smaller, some of them are lighter. These are Henryville specials, a different kind of fly, rather beaten up. I mean, most of these flies have been fished, so some of them are quite in bad shape. But you can see these lighter colored ones, they're still following the Kings River caddis style of tying. So what I did was I took that basic style of the Kings River caddis and started changing the colors and changing the sizes to fit all of the different kinds of caddis I was seeing on our local river. And the same thing goes for the elk hair caddis. I mean, some of these are done with elk hair, some are done with natural deer hair. Some of them are done with dyed deer hair. Again, same basic pattern, the elk hair caddis. I just changed a bunch of colors and sizes to fit what I was seeing coming off of my local river. But if you look here, there's not a lot of variation. It's not like this thing here, where I've got all these different kinds of flies. This is as a result of me doing steelhead patterns, or my wet flies here, where we have all these different styles. This is counterproductive. You don't want a fly box full of different styles. I only have these because of all the fly tying videos I've done. What you want is a fly box that looks something like this, where you've got a lot of a similar pattern that you know how to fish, that fits your local waters. So if you were doing a Kings River caddis pattern, and I have a video on doing the Kings River caddis, you may want to do it different colors to match your predominant caddis species. And you don't need to do them all the same as the original pattern. And the question is getting out there and taking a look. I do the same thing with pheasant tails and gold rib hare's ears. I make small changes to them, and they're not done like the originals, but they work better in my river for the more heavily weighted or the size. I've done something to change it to make it a little bit more appropriate to where I fish. So I'm making these changes for specific reasons. And if you Google a specific Hydropsyche species, for example, and you look at the different photos, you will see some gradations in tone. You might have 5 pictures of the same insect from different rivers, and they all have subtle different colors. So it doesn't hurt to go out on your river, bug photography as opposed to fishing, Go out there with a good little camera, maybe even just your phone if that's all you've got, and try to take pictures of, the caddis, the mayflies, whatever you can find, so you can have some idea of the colors. Because, if you're going out there with a dark caddis and the predominant species is a light colored caddis, the odds of you doing well are not that great. I mean, you will catch some fish, but you're not going to catch as many as if you had something that was a bit closer to the natural. And that's what this is all about. It's not an exact fit, it's getting close. And that's all we need, is if it's light tan, you want light tan. If it's a green body, you want a green body. If it's a dark wing, you want a dark wing. And size is often one of the most important criteria. You get the size right, and you can often catch them on, flies that don't have anywhere near the right coloring, but they've got the right size. And that's often true as well. So don't get locked in to, it's a size 14 hook, and it's got to have exactly this material and exactly this wing and exactly that hackle. Well, that was designed that way for the river where that fellow was fishing. And it may not be the right color scheme for your river. So get to know your local bugs and tie just a handful of patterns, not hundreds of different patterns, just a handful of patterns, and modify those patterns as needed to fit the size and the color of what is coming off at that moment. So if I went out with, one of the things I'm missing, I've only got one little granum in here, but I would tie up a bunch more granums when we're getting close to that part of the season, and I'd go out here with a bunch of them, but they'd all be tied with the Kings River caddis style of tying, just different color, different size. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about modifying patterns. You can pick basic patterns, and instead of getting a Goddard caddis and a this caddis and a that caddis and have a box full of different caddis, you've just got a handful of patterns that you've changed the colors and sizes to match your local hatches, and that'll do the job just fine. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to use elk hair or you have to use a Kings River caddis. No, pick what you want, pick what you like, and then fit it to your local conditions, and you're good to go. So keep that in mind when you're modifying patterns. We all do it because we're missing material. Be careful if you're modifying it just for creativity reasons, because you might end up with something that doesn't work well. And the other thing is modifying basic patterns to fit your local hatches, which I think is a very intelligent way to go. So keep that all in mind when you're starting out to modify your patterns. Cheers.